If you have lived in the North American region, you can't deny that you have used weather network services to make your life easier. And it is also a fact that in any civilized part of the world where internet is available, Google has made life easier for millions of people. It's a very rare opportunity we get to talk to an ex-Googler, Vice President and Country Manager Google Canada, and current CEO of Pelmorex CEO, which is the home of the Weather Network. Our today's guest is Sam Sebastian. If you would think all these accomplishments are less for a lifetime, he is an ace tennis player and current member of board of directors for Tennis Canada. An outsider would think all these accomplishments would make him a little hard to reach out to. But on the other hand, he is one of the most down-to-earth person you would ever come across. And a bonus, his sense of humor is impeccable. Today, we talk to him to understand what young leaders need to incorporate in them to be a cut above leader, how to make exigent decisions regarding your career switch, inclusiveness of every community in the North American region, and how to maintain a work-life balance. Welcome, Sam. It's an honor and delight to have you on our show, Superhero Tales.
Thanks so much, Yash, for having me, and hopefully I can be helpful, and I look forward to the conversation.
Same here, Sam. And before we start this conversation, one note to our viewers: if you like the interview and content of our channel, do like and subscribe. Starting the interview, Sam, you had been working in one of the world's most desired place to work. Was moving from Google to Pelmorex a tough decision? I know you moved to Canada from United States to handle the Google operations. What was the final contemplation on your end to take the final call?
Well, I was at Google for about 11 and a half years, 8 in the US, running various different businesses based in Chicago. And then I moved to Toronto to run the Canadian operation for about 3.5 years. So I had been at Google for what felt like 5 different phases of the company. So I got a chance, when I started, it was a relatively small, they had gone public, but they were still relatively small. And when I left, it was hundreds of thousands of employees and just a very mature company. And so I had seen a lot, even in a relatively short period of time. And I had developed a lot. And ultimately, even when I started my business career years back, I had in my head, for whatever reason, that ultimately I wanted to be a CEO and run my own company in some form. And that just had continued to stick with me. And so when we moved to Canada, we moved my family to Canada to run Google Canada. I figured maybe I'd be there for 3 or 4 years and then move back to the States or somewhere else around the world for Google. But we fell in love with Canada. We fell in love with Toronto. My kids were in high school. So we said, you know what, let's stay at Google if I can continue to learn and be challenged. But otherwise, if I'm going to look for my next thing and I want to continue to move toward maybe my ultimate goal, let's be open to staying in Canada and maybe even leaving Google. And it happened a lot faster than I expected. My first client meeting when I moved to Canada was with Pelmorex. They were a customer of our DoubleClick at the time product. And I got to know Pierre Morissette, who was the founder, very well. We hit it off, we became friends. And he had approached me about a year and a half before I left, and said, would you ever be interested in following me as the CEO of Pelmorex? And I wasn't ready at the time to leave Google, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew I could learn so much more. I knew I could add a lot of value to Pelmorex, and I knew the DNA and the culture was there that would be a great fit. And I trusted Pierre, and I think he the same with me. And so it just kind of felt right. And for the most part, I've used my instinct and my gut when I've made big decisions. And because I had seen so much of Google and it felt like I was there for a very long time and through all these different phases, I just felt comfortable that that was the time. And that was almost 4 years ago, and I've never looked back.
Wow, that was a tough decision for sure, but glad that it all came through really well. So when you start in a specific job role, Sam, in a specific team, you're aware of job responsibilities you would have. But when you would commence as a CEO, it would be a different ball game, right? So were there different preparations you had to adopt to before taking up the role?
Yeah, so I think for me, the thing I really needed to make sure before I stepped into the role on day one is that Pierre, who was the founder of the company and their only CEO, and who had built it for the previous 28 years, that he and I were aligned, both from a value perspective, expectation perspective, following in someone's footsteps like Pierre, a great Canadian entrepreneur, is a tall order. And we just always needed to make sure that we were aligned. And so we defined what some of that would look like in advance. And so I felt very comfortable. So that mission number two was really, I told him, and then I told all the employees when I started, I'm just going to listen. So we were about 500 employees across 4 offices around the world at the time. And my goal was to get in front of every employee in some form in the first 60 or 90 days and just listen. And then based on those sessions and based on what I was hearing, then I could build my own model of where I could plug in, how I could add value, what I needed to do based on feedback from everyone that was building the business themselves versus someone coming in, even though I had some really good experience at Google, just saying, well, here's what we're going to do. Number one, it would be wrong. Number two, it wouldn't fly. And I wouldn't have folks on board. And so that was a whirlwind. I was in Montreal on day 2. I was in Madrid on day 30. And I just met as many people as possible, but I still have the binder of notes that I check every once in a while just to make sure that many of those insights that I first heard on those tours, I'm constantly using and leveraging as we continue to build the business. So the last point I'll make that I didn't realize as much, when you're a CEO, every move you make, everything you say, every place you are, whether you're smiling when you're walking down the hallway to the bathroom or not, all of those things get picked up. Those are signals that employees take from you. And I didn't appreciate that as much as I did until after I got into the role. And now I'm just very mindful of that. It's very powerful because I have an opportunity to signal the right things and be honest and authentic. But I just have to be very mindful that everyone is kind of picking things up, which I just wasn't used to as much. Now that I've gotten to know almost all the employees, it's a little bit easier for me, and they know me, and vice versa. But in the beginning, it was a different situation. It was a different feeling.
Wow. And the point you mentioned about listening, they always say, right, if you want to become great, you have to listen, right? So that's a valuable insight for all of us. And when you are a leader of an organization, Sam, you would have to make some tough calls. What, according to you, is the correct state of the mind to keep the growth exponential and also make sure that the current operations are smooth?
Well, that's probably the toughest job. Until you live it, you don't recognize how difficult it is. As a CEO or as a leader, almost in any business, you have to think with a microscope and a telescope. So you have to know enough about the business so that when things get tough, or when someone needs support, or when you're not quite sure you're getting all the right information, that you can go deep like a microscope and see what's going on and have the right context and perhaps make some tough decisions, some quick decisions, or at least know what's kind of going on to a certain extent on the front lines. But ultimately, the job of the CEO is to operate with a telescope to see the next 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and to build the organization, build the muscles, set the strategy. That combination of being ready to be able to see around the corner 15 years in advance, but also know and be expected to know. Pierre asks me all the time, where are we with this particular thing, this particular number? I have to be accountable to that as well. That's a tough combination. I relish it. I'm not great at it. I'm getting better at it. But that's the role of a senior leader in an organization. And then when you understand that that's the expectation, you just have to be prepared to make pretty quick decisions. You want to make quick decisions when the implications don't matter as much. When the implications matter a lot, you just need to take a lot more time, study a lot more information, and then make a call. And sometimes the worst thing is not making a decision. or waiting too long for it. And if it doesn't have massive implications and we could course correct in 6 months, then I'll require even less information because I'd rather make a decision, rather move pretty quickly if I know I can pivot. If it's a massive decision that will carry us for the next 10 or 15 years, that's a little different. Then you want to really step back, make sure you have all the components and make the right decision. But sometimes making a quick decision, even if you don't know if it's 100% right, is best because speed wins these days in the digital and the data environment.
For sure. You can have a lot of employees, right? But it is said that it is the leader's responsibility to turn a vision into reality, right? So with the questions going around, I have also a quick game with you that is called the rapid fire round with Sam. In this, I would ask you quick questions.
Okay.
You have to be quick. So if whenever you are ready, I'm ready with my questions. So
Great. Go ahead.
Okay. So what is more stressful? A bad performance review of an employee or bad quarter in terms of revenue?
I would say a really tough, courageous performance discussion with an employee can be difficult because you have to take such great care.
For sure. You are the boss at Pelmorex Corp. Who is the boss at home? You or your wife, Kathy?
It's 100%, 100%. So it's not 50-50, it's not 80-20. We both are 100% accountable for all decisions. I like to say that, but I think we all know who's probably the boss at home, Kathy.
Yeah, that is a good answer, Sam. So choose between Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, or Sergey Brin. One leader you really look up to.
Of those four, I got a chance to see Larry and Sergey in person. I really loved Larry's ability to go from founder to CEO. Sergey stepped back a little bit and Larry became the CEO, and to watch him develop from a kid founder into a leader willing to make really tough, principled decisions, I learned a lot from watching him run Google.
That's a beautiful one, for sure. Again, a choice between Rafa Nadal, Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, and Serena Williams. Who, according to you, will be remembered as the greatest of all time in this era?
Serena, for sure. I think Serena could go down as perhaps the greatest athlete of all time. Her ability to, through various different generations, be at the top, stay at the top when all the pressure was on her. I'd love to see her get 1 or 2 more Grand Slams and then she'll cement that, but I love watching her play.
That's an awesome one, and I think so, and I agree more with your answer.
Yeah.
Tell us any one superstition you believe in.
One superstition, I don't know if it's a superstition or it's become a bit of a living, but my wife is kind of very spiritual and has and lives by the secret. And the secret, for the most part, is put out into the world what you want to receive. And so with the same, and I've practiced that for the most part over the past 10 or 15 years, but based on Kathy, and I would swear by it.
Oh, that's a good one. Choose between the new age female American stars, Bianca, Naomi, Sophia Cannon, or Coco Gauff. Who would be the biggest star in the future?
I think I would love to say Bianca. I'm on the board of Tennis Canada, and I think Bianca is one of our largest stars in the game.
Yeah.
I really like Naomi, though, because I think she has a blend of a bunch of different skills and has embraced, even though sometimes she doesn't want to, has embraced her role as a role model.
A company apart from Pelmorex, which according to you has shown great potential in last 10 years?
Oh, I'd have to say Shopify. I mean, it's in our backyard, so I've watched it closely.
Oh, awesome. If you were not in the corporate domain, what other profession would you think you would be in?
My dad was a school teacher, a high school teacher, and a tennis and football coach. I think I like motivating, I like leading, I like coaching. So and I like learning and projecting. So I'd probably follow my dad's footsteps.
Oh, and you would be an amazing teacher. I can vouch for that.
Mm.
And last but not the least question is, if there was only one person you reach out to for any suggestions or advice, who would be that person?
Sorry, it hit me. My dad passed away about a year and a half ago, and he was kind of my closest advisor forever. So I still talk to him all the time. But if he could talk back, that would be the one guy I'd love to catch up with.
That's such a beautiful answer, Sam, and the privilege of seeing the video you once shared with us that he was giving a pep talk, and that was one of the because I have been in sports, so I've heard a lot of pep talk, but yeah, that was one of the best ones I have ever heard. So yeah,
he was a great motivator. So it was a pleasure to share that.
Yeah, that was an amazing one, and you were really candid. And the humor was also on. So I will give you a 9 out of 10 on the performance, Sam.
Thank you.
But yeah, that was an amazing rapid fire. So moving on with questions I have for you. The topic of maintaining a healthy work-life balance right now is an highest priority on a lot of individual and companies, top management minds also. What, according to you, is the key to keep that balance? And also, how important is your wife Kathy's and children Sophie and Will's support for it? Like, does it gives you a bolster to do your job properly or more efficiently?
Of course. I think, listen, I'm not very good at it. So I tend to obsess about things. So when I'm in the middle of when I'm working, it's hard for me to release it. So I'm always thinking about it, which sometimes is a drain with my family because they know that I'm a bit distracted. So I work hard to try to create space and pivot points from when I say leave work to when I go home. The last year and a half has been very difficult for me because my home is my work. I just leave my little office here and I move into the living room and boom, but I haven't processed the come down of a day at work. So I've been trying, so part of work-life balance, I think, is creating the separation so that you can mentally pivot from one important space of your life to another. Yeah. But also I think that work-life balance are blending. I love what I do at work. I obviously love what I do with my family and at home. I talk about work all the time with my wife. I get help from her. My kids are now first year in university in grade 11, so I talk to them about it as well. And my daughter's going into business, so I can help her. So the lines blend a little bit, and I just always have to make sure I have a couple of times, throughout a week or throughout a month or throughout a year, work gets a little heavy and takes me too far this way. Then I just have to remind myself, listen, I'm not being there for my family. I got to move back this way, take some time off, redirect here. But it's a constant, it's going back and forth all the time. It's almost impossible to have the perfect balance.
And at the end of the day, it's like a balancing act. And moving on to the next question, the topic of inclusiveness of every community in the North American region is on the rise. What, according to you, is the best solution to bring this change in an organic way?
Well, we've been on this journey a bit over the last year and a half at Pelmorex, and I think it comes down to trust and vulnerability. And we're developing this, but we still have a long way to go. If you trust those you work with, and they trust you, you're going to be willing to share and be your full self with them at work. And that's when you're going to do your best work. That's when you're going to be a best teammate. And so in being yourself, bringing your full self to work, that not only is important from an equity perspective, an inclusive perspective. It's just being yourself. You don't want to have to be someone else when you spend 50-60% of your life at a job. You don't want to fake it. And so what we've been trying to do as much as we possibly could is allow folks to open up, be vulnerable, build ties and trust with one another. Then you're more willing to accept folks, embrace them, empathize with them. So I think that's most important. It takes a long time to build that, but the best teams I've been on were ones that trusted one another and where everyone could be open, vulnerable, and available emotionally for one another.
That's a valid point. Trust is a very important aspect in every relationship we have. And with your answer, I am hopeful that one day we would live by the words that diverse is beautiful. And hopefully that change would come very soon. Sam, I know you have been an ace tennis player. Please take us through your journey, and also please tell us about your dad's role in it.
Yeah, so my dad was a football player and a tennis player, and when I was 12 or 13, he looked at me and he said, "Listen, you're not going to be a football player. You're going to need to be a tennis player. You're not built like I am for football." So we just started playing every day for 2 or 3 hours. I loved it, and in order for me to get a really good education in university, I needed to get an athletic scholarship. And so we just worked really hard so that I could pay my way through school. And it just allowed me to compete, be on a team, pay for school. And it was, it's something I'm extremely proud of. And I loved the game of tennis. Then I basically left the game in order to be kind of a business person, but I'm really grateful the past 3 or 4 years to be able to serve on the board of Tennis Canada and kind of get back to some of my tennis roots. So it was very important in my own development. And my dad, and the other part that was nice is, even though it was intense sometimes, my dad was my coach, and he was my dad, and he was my school teacher. And so it was also something we could do together, which again, sometimes was a bit too much because he was pretty intense. He was a football player, tennis coach, but I wouldn't want it in any other way because he built a lot of the muscles that I needed to succeed.
Wow, that's an amazing answer, Anna. So I can imagine it would be much tougher on your dad to play both the roles together. But I know that has been because you played tennis so nicely and you are still in Tennis Canada. When players join association, that helps. I've seen it from personal experiences. So
real quick on that, the issue we have in Canada versus many other places around the world is it's too cold. So we need many more covered courts in Canada so that kids can play year round. And it's a big focus of Tennis Canada is to get more covered courts so that we can compete with folks in Florida or Italy or Spain, where they can pretty much play year round. But we'll get there.
For sure. And I agree with that point. So that's a very big factor which you have raised, and I completely agree with that. So last but not the least question I have, Sam, for you is that there is a proverb right now that modesty is the new cool, right? And I've seen that quality in you in abundance. And if you have a quick glance in other tech giant leaders like Sundar Pichai or Mark Zuckerberg or Indian billionaire like Mukesh Ambani, you see that quality that they are very modern. Do you think that young leaders can incorporate that quality in them to be on a sensitive side?
It's a great question, Yesh. I think I do think the model of leadership has evolved, right? I think years ago, a command and control general approach, like an army or army general, was kind of the expectation and the accepted way to run something, right? You defined it, you yelled it, you barked it, and like a Woody Hayes football coach. But now when you watch coaching or leaders like Bill Belichick or a Mike Krzyzewski at Duke or a Sundar at Google, it's one of the intensity is still there, the hard work, but it's the connectivity with the players. It's the thoughtfulness of how they get their point across. And I think that's required for the next generation of employees or players that someone is leading.
Yep.
I do think it works, and I think it probably works better. It's all I've ever known, so I don't really have another approach that works for me. I've kind of taken my own leadership philosophy based on everything that I've seen throughout my career in either sports or business, and then I just do what I think works best for me. But I have found there is a little bit of a transition and evolution from that command and control to one more of servant leadership. What can I do for you? How can I help break down obstacles? Because ultimately, you're going to probably get a hell of a lot more done in a company if all 500 employees have all obstacles broken down and they can go run, versus one person who's going to do everything. And so far it's worked for me when I've employed that, and I probably get sometimes more out of someone who is that inclusive and humble and modest a leader as well. So we'll see. Leadership changes over time and goes through different phases of what's the best practice, but it's definitely something that I think is alive and well right now.
Oh, that's very well said, Sam. And they say, right, that modesty is a gem of a virtue to have. And with your answer, that proves that it doesn't cost you anything to make a person feel little better, and being little patient and making them feel like a part of the team. And thanks a lot for sharing that answer and overall giving your time for this interview, Sam. It had been
my pleasure.
A complete pleasure, delight. And hopefully I have a plan for doing a round 2 in person where everything opens up. So we would be able to talk more. But for today's time and your knowledgeable insights, thanks a lot from the team and from me. And have a great day ahead.
Of course, Yesh. Thank you very much. And we'll have to get out on the ping pong table with one another as well.
For sure. And I'm really want to get beaten up bad, but I will also want to have a tennis match one day. So I would be getting beaten badly, but
Perfect.
Yeah, it would be an honor. So Thanks a lot, Sam. And
thank you.
Have a good day.